What's up, Legacy Life? Just yeah, welcome to the Monday Night Team Call, part two on annuities, and we're going to be talking about the truth about indexing. And I wanted to talk about this just because it's the fixed indexed annuities out there are very popular. A lot of people like fixed index annuities. I think that they're great. And I just wanted to make I just wanted to give you guys some stuff, and this is also applicable to the IULs that that we're out there talking about. So I'm going to talk about this in particular, and then throughout the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about some other ways, other growth annuities and other growth products and other income annuities and other, income products and, different scenarios and situations, some case studies, things like that. So just going to jump right into it here. And for those of you guys that, maybe you're newer to the annuity side of the business or what have you, I have some software that I pay for. You could go get the software. I think if you do it through Chris Norris, you get a discount. It's called Annuities Genius. It just has tons of it has all the annuity companies in it. Okay. So it makes quoting and everything really, really simple. So I'm going to be using that. That's what you're going to be seeing on the screen here. Don't worry about the technicals of like, oh, how do you do this? How do you do that? Like, especially if you're newer in the annuity side, like I didn't get this until I'd written probably 10 annuities. Okay. So it's absolutely not required. We can help you run some of these illustrations. So can Chris Norris, Michael, me, whoever. So I'm just going to jump into this. And so as we're talking about annuities, and I talked a little bit about this last week, like what can annuity do? It could do growth, it could do safety, and it can do income. And really, safety is given with anything that we're going to do anyway. So we're talking like we can either do growth or we can do income. And what I'm talking about here is this is a growth scenario. Okay. And how do we go about picking companies for growth scenarios? What's a good growth product? What's a not so good growth product? How do a lot of these products get sold out there in the marketplace? And how can we be better agents? How could we be the agents that when we call and do our annuity reviews with our clients, they're happy with the results rather than, hey, we sold them this, but they're disappointed because it didn't come to fruition. So that's one disclaimer. Okay, like that's what we're going to go through. My disclaimer here is, I'm not, as we go through this, I'm just going to show you guys the numbers. I'm just going to show you guys the data behind some of these indexes and why, I'll just give you guys the punchline here. We're just going to stick to the S&P 500. Okay, that's the bottom line. Like I believe pretty firmly in this just because I've seen what it looks like otherwise. And so we're going to stick to the S&P 500 as far as indexes. Do I believe the same thing with IULs? My opinion, yes. Okay, someone else might have a different opinion. Does it mean that those other indexes are bad or they're not going to work? Or I have no idea. Okay, there's so many different indexes. I don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen. So it's really, really hard to tell. So I just stick to the S&P 500. Why the S&P 500? It's the 500 largest companies in the United States of America. They get the ones that are slowing down or like getting out of it, like the ones that are shrinking. They get them out. They add new companies, all kinds of stuff. The S&P 500 has really been one of the best buy and hold investments over the past we'll call it 50 years, 80 years, whatever. So I'm just going to jump into this. So this is what that software looks like. Again, you don't need to worry about having the software. You don't need to worry about any stuff. I just made a fake client here. He's got 100,000. He's 65. His name is Scott. Scott retiree. All right. And so in here, okay, if we go look at and again, I'm not trying to pick on companies. I'm not trying to pick on different products. I'm not trying to pick on any of that stuff. Okay, really, all I'm doing here is I'm just showing you guys data. All right, and again, I'm not picking on companies. I'm just gonna roll through some of this stuff. So first of all, these are the highest performing indexes over the past couple of years. If you look, they all have to do with gold. Okay, and F&G actually has some of these gold accounts on some of their products. Yeah, F&G point to point gold with a cap, like that's kind of awesome. So they have some of these. Americo has some gold. But okay, can we depend on gold to always do good? I don't know. I like gold. Maybe you should buy gold. Maybe your client should. I don't know. But so let's just and again, I'm shooting at the hip here. I'm just making a point of why do we go with the S&P 500 rather than looking at some of these other indexes. Okay, and let me just find one on here that uh, that I've seen. Okay, let's look at the Barclays. Okay, so when I first got started in the business, full transparency with you guys, everyone was talking about the Barclays, the Barclays, the Barclays, and F&G has some some great annuities, and they use this Barclays. So how could someone have the same annuity product, same company, same product, different indexes, and have a completely different outcome? So there's a couple of things here, and I'm just walking you guys through my process when we're talking about growth and we're talking about a fixed indexed annuity for growth. Okay, how do I decide what companies I like or don't like, or what product? Like, there's so many different products out there. So here's part of how I decided. So just looking at the Barclays, you guys. Okay, so if you look at the past 10 years, okay, the Barclays would have averaged 5.5%. Over the past 15 years, 13.2%. Past 20 years, it's averaged 9.76%. Here's the only thing, is the Barclays didn't actually exist. They made it up, okay, it started, that index started, I'm not trying to be derogatory here, but that index didn't start until 11/30 of 2015, okay? And just to show you guys a couple of things, when I am talking to clients, the way that I go about this, and I've even explained this to clients, because some of these illustrations that people get are just nutty. Like, they're out of this world as far as what their annuity is going to grow to. And so if you look at this, it has there's a couple different things in annuities. Okay, there's something called a cap. That means a cap is like where they're going to put a cap on what that index does. Let's say the cap is 10%. The S&P 500 goes up to 10, goes up to 15%. They're going to cap you at, hey, you just earned 10%, even though it did 15. That's one way that they do it. All these companies have different caps and all that kind of stuff. The same thing is true in IULs. They also have something called participation. Okay, participation means, let's say you have 100% participation. The S&P goes up 10%, you get that full 10%. Let's say you only have 50% participation. Okay, the S&P goes up 10%, you only get 5%. Okay, so this one right here has 295% participation. Okay, and the lowest that they can go on this is 100%. So you can't go below 100%, and it's a 2-year index. And it also has a fee. Okay, and I know I'm kind of just jumping through the weeds here, but some of these allocations within products have fees. Some of the allocations do not have fees. This one has fees. This one does not. Okay, and notice that they're going to give you a little bit less when it doesn't have a fee versus when it does have a fee. Okay, so let's look at the one without a fee. By the way, side note, my opinion, I'm not a fan of accumulation products that have account fees. Okay, I think you can do perfectly well without an account fee. And what the account fee means is if the market goes up or the market goes down, they get charged this account fee. Okay, and so I'm just not the biggest fan of it, of the account fees and all that good stuff. So I'm going to avoid the account fees. I think you should avoid the account fees as well. And if we look at this one without a fee, you get 255% participation. Okay, and I'm not trying to pick on F&G. I'm not trying to pick on the Barclays. I'm just trying to show you guys the numbers. Okay, this is what the Barclays has done. Okay, year to date, 1 year ago, the past year, the past 3 years, and then the past 5 years. This is what it's actually done. I'm not making up the numbers. Okay, the past, and then here's the past 10 years. So if you bought an annuity, okay, let's say that this existed back then. It didn't, because it didn't launch until 2015. But if you bought an annuity, okay, 10 years ago, and you put it all into the Barclays, okay, you would have averaged 0.79%, okay, for 10 years. But you also get 255% participation. So let's take the 0.79, you multiply it by 255%. No, that's not right. Hold on. You multiply it by 2.55. Well, maybe that is right. Yeah. No, that's right. 255%. And you would have averaged just about 2% per year being in the Barclays. Okay, for the past 10 years. And again, I'm just going off of the data here. And if you look at this, like, you would have averaged 2% per year. Okay, you'd have been better off going into a MYGA rather than a fixed indexed annuity. Okay, even though they're illustrating, they show you the 4.83. How are they able to show you that 4.83? Because they're going off of calendar years, they're going on, but it hasn't done spectacularly well. Okay, whereas, like, let's compare that to, again, I'm just talking about the S&P 500 here. Here, let's where did that go? And again, I'm talking about growth products and I'm talking about fixed index annuities. How do we do this the best way possible for our clients? Okay. And if we just compare that, I just want to do a quick comparison here with the golly, and they're going to do all these things on here. Okay. We're going to say, let's just look at one with no fees. Here we go. So what is the S&P done? Okay. In the past 10 years, 10%. Okay. So even if you got 50% participation, 40% participation being in the S&P, you would have done better than 255% participation, okay, in the Barclays. Okay. And they're not the only one. And again, I'm not trying to pick on anybody. But let me just show you guys this. Like, this is why, and again, this is my opinion. If we're going to do growth and we're going to do growth inside of an annuity, we're going to stick to the S&P 500. Okay, like here's another one. This is the 3-year Loomis. Okay, so when did this thing launch? Okay, it launched in 2024, so 1 year ago. How are they able to give you the 10-year numbers, the 20 years numbers? They're doing it because they're back testing it. Okay, and so if we go look at what has this index actually done? Okay, over the past 10 years, 9.18 again. That's all back tested. Anything before 6 months ago or 9 months ago, okay, it's all back tested. It didn't actually exist at that time. Okay, this index existed on this date moving forward. You can even see it on here, right there. That's where it started to actually exist. So since it existed, it's gone down, 6%. That doesn't really mean anything. The whole market's down. And the rest of this is back tested. And if you look at a lot of these, um, um, when they get launched from that point forward, not to say that they can't do well, like they could do well, but a lot of them end up not doing as well, because you and I could go create an index right now today and just say, hey, this thing's awesome and look how well it's done. Doesn't mean it's going to do well into the future. And so let's just look at, like, hey, what would this have done if it existed in 2024? It would have done 11.52%. That's pretty sweet. What about 8.72% in 2023? Hey, not bad. What did the S&P 500 do? Oh, the S&P 500 was at 23.31 and 24%. You guys get what I'm saying, okay? And this is across the board. I'm not picking on Nationwide. I'm not picking on any of these guys. But if we just go look at, like, hey, where are the 1-year indexes? Let's just go look at the. I'm gonna keep picking different companies here. Let's look at the 1-year indexes with different companies. Sorry. Okay, let's look at no, not that one. Well, let's see what this does. Okay, yeah, that one's not bad. S&P. Let's see here. I hope I'm making sense and I'm not jumping ahead too much here. Here, those guys have some other stuff too. All right, let's go look at one of these. 1-year Morgan Stanley strategic trends. Okay. 9% average. This index launched also in 2024. This is with a company called Allianz. If you ever want to write an Allianz annuity, we can do it. They might have some good stuff. Some of you guys like them quite a bit. Year to date, not so good. 2023, hey, that thing kicked butt. 19%. You would have done really well. So look at 2024 though. Like, it was still up. It was still up. Okay. You still would have been better off more in the S&P 500, and it's more predictable. It's more predictable. Like, look at hold on, look at this. This is the S&P. Sorry, flip these. This is the S&P year to date, down 6%. This is this thing. It's down more than the S&P, and it didn't grow as much as the S&P in 2023. And you say, well, yeah, but look, they're giving you an 85 percent participation rate. Hey, maybe that thing's good, but you're kind of gambling. Is it going to be good? I don't know. Is it not going to be good? I have no idea. Whereas if you just look at, here's how I go about finding and deciding upon a good, no joke, you guys, like, this is literally what I do. Okay. I will look at the S&P 500 1 year. Okay. And the reason I like 1 year indexes inside of an annuity versus a 2 year index or a 3 year index or a 5 year index or, whatever. And again, this is my opinion, is after 1 year, you're going to get some growth if the market goes up. And when we say the market, most people are talking about the S&P 500. Okay, or the Dow Jones or the Russell or the Nasdaq. Like they're talking about one of those major indexes, not one of these ones we haven't heard of. Okay, and the worst place you could ever be as far as being helping somebody with annuities is having to explain to your client why the S&P was up 24% last year and their index was up 3% or 2%, or they didn't make any money at all and the S&P 500 was up. Okay. It is a not fun conversation to have. How do I know? Because I've had to have those conversations with my clients because I didn't know some of this stuff early on. Okay. And I was just kind of going with the flow, and people told me this one, people told me that one. Don't ever go based off of what don't even go off of what I'm saying. Okay. Like this is my opinion. I'm trying to show you the numbers. But when you have an account rep at an insurance company and they're buying you dinner, like, hey, we got the best stuff ever. Maybe it is good. I don't know. Let's look at the numbers. That's really what I'm saying here. So if we look at who's got the best S&P accounts with no fee, notice how a lot of these have a fee on there. So let's change it with the fees, no fees. A lot of you guys are wondering like, hey, why does Nick tell me to go with Lincoln all the time? Well, here's why I tell you to go with Lincoln is they have a 62% participation on the S&P 500. And if you carry that back 10 years, which by the way, the S&P 500 has been around since like the 50s or whatever, so these are real numbers. It's not back tested. It'd be 9% average. 15 years is 8% average. This is 7. Silac has one too, but Silac's a B-rated company. I don't really like them. I would avoid them. Quite frankly, if I were you guys, they were B plus. They're now B. I don't have anything more to say about them. I haven't done any study on their business or solvency or any of that kind of stuff. It's just, hey, if we could get something as good or better with an A-rated company, like, hey, let's do it with an A-rated company rather than a B-rated company, or like Delaware is another one. Like, hey, if you guys want them, you could probably get them. NASA, I do like NASA. They're a B plus plus company. So you can see all of these companies without a fee on the account. Okay, this one has a fee. This is a different fee because this is an income product, totally different thing. We'll talk about that later. But like, hey, who's got the best performing S&P 500 accounts? On a 1 year reset. The reason I like 1 year is because they're going to get some growth after that year, and then if the market tanks, that after that growth, that's their new floor. And if the market goes up, well, now they're going up based off of that higher number rather than in a 2 year account. Like, hey, if they go up 1 year and then it goes down 1 year, they might not get a whole lot of growth, and there's no annual compounding. It's never getting credited, okay, or it gets credited every 2 years rather than every 1 year. Which I like the 1 year accounts. Okay, just to keep it simple. So who else has some good ones? America has one. Let's look at instead of looking at participation, let's just look at caps. Okay, who's got really good caps? This is monthly sum on the S&P. Let's say we want yearly sum on the S&P. Gillico actually has a pretty good cap right now on that product. That's solid for sure. They're an A- company. Global Atlantic has a 10.5% cap. Lincoln again has 10.25. F&G has a pretty good monthly cap. What's the difference between monthly and annual? Is on the monthlies, you could get some pretty big home runs on monthly accounts. If you're new, if you're new, and I'm digging in a little bit too much here on the numbers and the data and all that kind of stuff. I just wanted to let you guys know, this is how, for me, how I go about making a lot of these decisions. As far as like, hey, where do I put somebody into a growth product, and how do we allocate the funds inside of their growth product where they're going to be happy? Okay, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when throughout the surrender period. Okay, monthly sum can make sense. Okay, maybe not for all of somebody's money, but monthly sum is going to take the months and it's going to tally those up on top of each other. The only downside to it is if there's some really big negative months, it can kind of wipe out the sum. So for example, let's just say that let's say you get 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. Okay, you're now at 8% for the year so far, but then there's a month where it goes down 5%. Well, now you're only at 3. Okay, it doesn't lock in each month where it was at. It adds them all up together at the end of that. So here's some companies with some good caps on their products. Okay. Um, that's how I go about making some of these accumulation type of decisions. Now, again, I don't want to beat up on any companies. Like there's a lot of great companies, a lot of great products. Some of those other ones that aren't the S&P could do really well. They absolutely could do really well. It's just I don't know if they're going to. And you're kind of playing with your client's money if you think uh, we just don't know. A lot of those have been, like I said, they've been back tested. They don't actually exist. It's kind of a made up. I don't want to say made up because they do actually make the indexes, but they like even this one right here, like this is a 1 year S&P 500 dynamic intraday, which I think this one's okay, but still this one's a couple years old. Like, hey, let's go look at this with North America and let's see how this is done. Hey, did pretty good right here, not as good as the S&P true right there. It's down a little bit more than the S&P year to date, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas like, hey, the S&P over the past year, even though we've had all this turbulence over the past year, it's still up 8% past 12 months, not calendar year, but past 12 months. So guys, I hope I'm not jumping ahead too much, but I wanted to give you guys some data. And we're going to do the same thing when it comes to income products. Like, what income products do I like? And some of you guys have even brought like cases to me of like, hey, I've got my clients, and they're talking about this company, and maybe you're out there competing with people. And I'm telling you guys, I am in those competitions all the time with different agents out there in the world. And let's see, let's just reset this whole thing. And I'm telling you, if you explain this to clients, they understand. Okay, they a lot of them have never heard of some of these different indexes that are out there. Even the different 1 year indexes, like okay, Morgan Stanley allocator, like that thing is gonna this thing right here is gonna illustrate at 12%. It's gonna look awesome. Okay, like if we were to go look at this illustration and show this to a client, like, look at this thing. Goes from 100 grand. Notice how, because there's a fee, the client actually is down money that first year. Okay, so that's what that means. That's why I don't like the fees. They start with 100,000. If it doesn't grow, they still get charged their fee. So now they're down a little bit. But look at this. 33%, 27%. I'm just telling you guys, like, you can reasonably expect inside of annuity, maybe like 6%, 8%, somewhere in there. If the market's doing particularly well and the companies are holding their rates, then like, yeah, you could get some really you can get some great returns. 6%, 7%, 8%, 9. Like you might have some awesome years, but having like it's probably not going to be like this. Okay, and a lot of clients, they are buying, and a lot of agents are selling off of the illustration, like, oh, look at this illustration, it's going to be incredible, your 100,000 is going to triple in 10 years. Okay, and that's what the client is buying. They're like, holy moly, this is the best, right? And then come to find out, like, hey, this thing is a little bit over a year old. And again, not trying to pick on F&G, love you guys, but I have a hard time believing that this index that was completely back tested, launched on 11/22 of 23, since it launched is down 0.83%. Past 5 years average, 4.8. But this is back tested data. It's not real data. The only real data is this one. Okay, and then hey, this one. Let's see, 2024 is real. 2023 isn't real because this thing didn't exist until November 22nd of 2023. So like we can say that it did this, but it didn't exist. It wasn't out there. Okay. Like you couldn't go look up, this index, okay, that day. And you could just go look at, you can go click on their websites. All right. And you can go look at a lot of times, like you can go look at this, and see what this thing has done, like year to date, past year. The software there will tell you. But even if you don't have the software, you can go look it up online and go see what some of these things have, what is the actual performance been. So, the same thing is true inside of IULs. Okay. And again, this is my opinion. I'm going to stick to the S&P 500, and I'm going to stick to who's got high caps, high participation rates, hold their rates really well. Some companies that do that. F&G has some really good rates. Columbus has some good stuff. A lot of the IUL carriers, have some good stuff. But when it comes to fixed index annuities for growth, which is a lot of what we're talking about out there, guys, I'm just telling you the difference between having a client that's disappointed when you have these anniversary date conversations versus a client that's happy and like, hey, you got 12% or you got 8% this year. Like 8% with no risk is awesome. Okay. It's really, really hard to have those conversations when the S&P is up and their account is down. I'm just telling you, like, they are not happy about it. You're not happy about it. You feel bad about it. So, my opinion is like, hey, when it comes to these indexes, let's stick to the S&P 500. Like I've never even I don't know what this Loomis sales discovery, but like, they made it 9 months ago, right? And didn't do as good as the S&P, didn't do as good as the S&P, not as good as the S&P, not as good as the S&P. Hey, hasn't gone as down as much as the S&P, so maybe that's cool. Um, I hope this is making sense. Here's another one from North America, and just to look at these guys. Um, Man, what a great year in 2023, but 2024 was weak, right? And since this thing launched, it's averaged 1%, and they'll make up for it. They'll make up for it by a lot of times giving you a higher participation rate, 200%, 300%. They'll give you some of these really high participation rates. And the point that I want to make here is it doesn't really 300% of 1% is just 3%. Like you'd be better off getting half of the 24% of what the S&P did last year, or a 10% cap, or a 9% cap, or a 7% cap. You guys with me? So it's like they will it's almost like they kind of do this sometimes to make the illustrations look really, really, really good, when in reality, like they might not look as good as you think. And there's a couple of ones that are kind of offshoots of the S&P that are kind of okay, like this intraday one. Like I think that one's probably I would feel good about putting somebody into this because it's done okay since 2023. It's not as good as the S&P. It's like if you had the option between this or the S&P, I would just do the S&P 500, like the actual S&P rather than the dynamic intraday. And maybe there's a reason there's that dynamic intraday, and maybe it's good in some situations. The other thing I wanted to show you guys was there's also these other accounts called performance trigger accounts. And there's all sorts of performance trigger accounts. All that means, and I like these accounts, by the way, but all that means is if this is positive, okay? So the 1 year S&P daily risk control 10%. What does that mean? It's an offshoot of the S&P 500. But if you look, it's been around since 2009, and it hasn't done as good as the S&P, but on a trigger account, it doesn't matter that much, okay? Because on a trigger account, if it just is positive a little bit, okay, the trigger just means if it's above zero, okay, if it's positive, 0 or above, then they're going to get the trigger amount. It doesn't have to be, it could be up 1%. And like on this case, on this Lincoln product, they would get 10.5% credited, even though it's only up 1%. Okay. And that's on that's on one of these products, but 10.25. Sorry. So this one we actually don't have. We don't have that advisory product. This Lincoln OptiBlend 10, which I think is really their best product. This thing is up 1% and you get credited 10.25. If it's negative, you get 0. So basically, this thing's positive. This thing and the S&P are positive, 10%. If it's negative, 0. All right. And again, if you go look at this, like it's done decently. It doesn't look as nice as the S&P, but we don't need it to get 10% or 20% or 50% or whatever. We just need this thing to be positive. A couple more good days here. Like you got a client with an anniversary date coming up. A couple more good days here. This thing's going to be positive. And they get credit their 10.25. Okay. So I like the trigger accounts. There's also I'm not going to get into the dual trigger account on here. There's a true S&P 500 trigger. Where's that one? Beep, 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 beep. I'm looking for it. There we go. S&P 500 performance triggered. Same thing on the true S&P 500. Hey, you're going to get 8.25 if it's positive, and this is the true S&P 500. Okay. You know, 8.25 if it's positive, and you're going to get 0 if it's negative. Okay. And, you know, you can even do some of these with like a rate lock in and all sorts of cool stuff. So, you know, that's my thought on those. Okay. So if we're setting people up with fixed indexed annuities for growth, we just we don't want to get them with a good company and a good product with bad indexes. Is just my opinion. Okay, like let's get them in with a good company with good products with good indexes. You know, and really, the S&P 500 is really the best. It's, you know, proven with time that the S&P has done really well. And I personally have clients that if they would have just been in the S&P and I wasn't taking the advice of this person or that person or this carrier rep or that carrier rep, my clients would have more money because I would have had I just put them into the S&P 500 rather than just trusting what some, you know, carrier rep is telling me, you know, about what's going out there as far as the indexes go. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys. I hope it's applicable, you know, when you're talking about annuities, when you're talking about IULs, how some of these things work, maybe some of the smoke and mirrors that goes on with some of these different indexes. I hope I'm not jumping the gun too much and like uh, getting, you know, going too far too fast, but I wanted to give you guys some of these numbers and how I make how my opinions, you know. And at the end of the day, that's really what this is. Other people would argue with me and tell me my opinions aren't right or whatever. Okay, and I'm not saying that all of those other indexes aren't good. I'm just saying the S&P is very predictable. Okay. And so I like that. And I think your annuity clients will like that as well. So appreciate you guys. Next week, we're going to go through some more stuff on annuities. We'll talk about income annuities. Maybe we'll go through, you know, multi-year guaranteed, the different types of annuities that are out there. You know, today was specifically about the fixed index annuities and the index options. So hope you guys found this valuable and have a blessed rest of your day. Let's go kick some butt, y'all. See you guys in Vegas.